All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining. Welcome to today's webinar, Achieve Clean Blazor Code with SonarQube and SonarCloud. Today, you will learn how you can leverage SonarQube and SonarCloud to maintain clean code in your Blazor applications. Whether you're a .NET developer considering adopting Blazor or already using it, you'll find this webinar to be helpful in terms of learning more about Blazor code. My name is Manish Kapoor, and I'm joining you from Austin, Texas. This webinar will be co-presented by Microsoft and Sonar. A big thank you to Microsoft for collaborating with Sonar on creating this content and delivering this content. Please allow me to go over some essential housekeeping points before we start. Dennis, if you can move to the next slide. Thank you. This session will last about 60 minutes and include a Q&A at the end. You are invited to submit all your questions via the Zoom Q&A box and not the chat box. We have one panelist joining us today. Thank you, Kostin. Kostin Zaharia from Sonar's languages team. He's going to help us answer as many of your questions live during this webinar. So as you put them into the Q&A box, Kostin will help us answer some of those questions. This session will be recorded, and we will send out a link to the recording in the upcoming days via email. Finally, at the end of this webinar, a short survey will pop up on your screen. We appreciate your feedback. It helps us improve our content and future webinars. Thank you in advance for participating in the survey. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to today's presenters, Daniel Roth, Andre Ipure, and Dennis Troller. Daniel Roth is the Principal Product Manager for Blazor on the .NET team at Microsoft. He's joining us from Seattle, Washington. Andre is the Engineering Manager of .NET Squad at Sonar. He speaks at various developer conferences about tooling and best practices in the .NET ecosystem. Dennis is the Product Manager for the .NET ecosystem at Sonar. He spent 20 years doing software development on .NET before joining Sonar. Dennis and Andrea are joining us from Geneva, Switzerland. All right, with that, I will hand it over to you. I think, Daniel, you go first. Over to you.
All right, thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. It's great to be here with my friends at Sonar. It's super exciting to be talking about how Blazor and Sonar's technologies can work better together. Let me go ahead and share my screen if that's all right. Let's pop this up. What we're going to do is we're going to start out talking just a little bit about what is Blazor and how it can help you build your next great web application. So Blazor is a modern front-end web framework for .NET that helps you build web apps fast. With Blazor, you can quickly build rich, interactive web experiences entirely in .NET using HTML and C#. Blazor is part of ASP.NET Core, our umbrella web framework for .NET, and it ships as part of the .NET platform. You can get started with Blazor in minutes and then stay productive using one language, one framework, one build system, all integrated with .NET, a supported platform that you can trust. Now, Blazor is based on a powerful, reusable component model that you can use to easily handle UI events, render updates, and set up two-way data bindings. Blazor comes with many built-in components for forms and validation and displaying large virtualized data sets. There are also many readily available Blazor components from the .NET community. You can use the latest open web standards with Blazor to build web apps that are installable and that work offline. We provide at Microsoft rich tooling for Blazor in Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, including project templates, support for hot reload, and AI-powered code editing. And while you typically write your Blazor apps in C#, you can also interoperate with JavaScript libraries if you need to. Now, Blazor's been around for a few years now, but we just shipped a really big update to Blazor in .NET 8. Blazor in .NET 8 is no longer just a client web UI framework. It's now a full stack web UI framework. In .NET 8, Blazor now has advanced server-side rendering capabilities, including static server-side rendering, or SSR, enhanced navigation and form handling, and streaming rendering. These capabilities help you optimize page load time and really polish the user experience. You can then enable rich interactivity for your components wherever needed, either from the server over a WebSocket connection or from the client via WebAssembly. You can even use both of these interactive render modes together in the same Blazor app and automatically shift users from the server to the client at runtime to improve app load time and scalability. Let me show you really quick how easy it is to get started with Blazor and build your first Blazor web app. So I'm going to hop over here to Visual Studio. And in Visual Studio, I'm just going to go ahead and create a new project. And I'm going to use the new Blazor web app template that we just shipped with .NET 8. Go ahead and select that, click Next. I'll pick the default template name and all the default options. Won't change any of those. And then Visual Studio will generate our first Blazor web app for us. We can go ahead and run it. Get that going so we can see what it looks like. There it goes. And it looks like it popped over here on my other screen, but here's the web application that Visual Studio just generated. So it's pretty simple. It's just got a few pages. We have a home page with just some static HTML content. That's all being rendered from the server. Then we have this counter page with a button that we can click and the count goes up. This is an example of an interactive component. It handles UI events like clicks, on drag, on change, those types of things. In this case, it's doing interactive server rendering. All the UI events are being handled over a WebSocket connection. And then lastly, we have this weather page where we're rendering a table of weather forecast data, again, from the server. Now, if we go back to Visual Studio, we can see the code for each of these pages. In home.razor, this is the component for the home page. We've just got some, basic static HTML, nothing too fancy here. In counter.razor, that's that interactive component, and we can see up at the top that it's using an interactive render mode, interactive server. So it sets up that WebSocket connection and can handle UI events. And then down below, we've got a button with an on-click event handler that's then calling into our C# method every time the button gets clicked to then increment the current count. So that's an example of an interactive component. And then in weather.razor, this is the weather page. This is kind of interesting. Let me undo that. It's using streaming rendering. What's streaming rendering? Well, that's a way that you can have a page render some initial placeholder content, like this loading ... placeholder, while long-running async tasks are being run, like doing an API call or getting some data from a database. So initially you see loading ... but when the weather data is available down below, we can see that it's rendering a table, and then it's using a normal C# for each loop to loop over all the weather forecasts and render the rows in that table. Down at the bottom, we can see how it's actually setting up the weather data. It's not actually doing an actual API call to a proper weather API. It's simulating an API call with just a task.delay. And in this case, all the weather data is being just randomly generated in memory. So don't plan your next vacation based off of this, this weather data. It's just random data. So that's a really basic Blazor web app, but with a lot of, really powerful capabilities right out of the box. But what if we want to do something a little bit more involved? Like what if you actually want to, connect to some data, display a grid of entities, be able to add data to your database? Can we do that too? And the answer is yes, of course, and we can do it fast. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to update this app to manage a list of movies. And to do that, I've got a movie class that I've already created. I'm just going to add an existing item here. This is just a C# class for representing a movie. I'll show you what's in here. This is a movie class, and it's got, an ID, so it can be identified, and it's got a title, release date, genre, and price. Just represent a basic movie. And I want to be able to store movies in a database and add movies to the database and, edit them and all that type of stuff. And in order to do that, I'm just going to right-click on this pages folder, say Add New Scaffolded Item. And we'll use the Razor component scaffolder that hooks up to Entity Framework Core and let Visual Studio do all the hard work for us. So we've got a bunch of templates that we can pick from here for basic CRUD operations, create, read, update, delete. We could pick individual templates, but I'm just going to select CRUD so that we get them all. And then we can select our model class, and I'm going to pick that movie class that we created earlier. And then we can select our DB context. I don't have one, so I'm going to go ahead and create one. Click add, and then we'll use SQL Server for our database. And I just make sure I stop the app that was running previously. We'll go ahead and add that, and then sit back and relax and let Visual Studio scaffold out a bunch of Blazor component pages for us based off of that movie data model that we added previously. All right, and after it just takes a second to examine the code and figure out what it needs to do. There we go. Okay, so now if we look over here in the Solution Explorer, we can see that we've got this movie pages folder now with a whole bunch of Razor components that were generated for us. The one that's showing here on the screen, this is for creating movies. So we've got a form and it's got validation set up and a whole bunch of built-in Blazor components for dealing with the various inputs. If we look at input index.razor, this is where it's displaying all the movies. And we can see this is using the new quick grid component that's included with Blazor. It's a data grid that's fast and functional. So we can, we do pagination and sorting and all those fancy things with our data set. All right, speaking of data, we actually need some movie data. So I'm going to seed the database with just a few movies so that we have something to play around with. I've got a few here in a little snippet that I'm just going to add to my DB context. And there we go. So I'm just adding this on model creating method that has a bunch of movies. And then now we need to run an Entity Framework core migration to actually set up the database. So I'm going to bring up the Visual Studio terminal, the developer terminal, and then let's make sure we're in the right directory. We are, and I'm just going to run. Did I save? Let me make sure I forget to save my seed data. So .NET EF is the command we're going to use. And we're going to run migrations, add, and then we just give it a name, like initial or movies or whatever. It doesn't really matter. You pick whatever name you'd like. And that will then examine the DB context and figure out what database schema it needs to set up in the database. And then to apply that, we just run .NET EF database update. And that should then run some SQL to set up the database for us and initialize it so that we can see our movies. And there it goes. Okay, so let's rerun the app. And now we bring back up the browser. There we go. Okay, and now instead of going to /weather, we're going to go to /movies. And if everything works properly, there we go. So I'm not having to write any code. I can now see all my movies. We've got this nice data grid control that we can use. I can add a new movie. Let's add E.T. was June 11th. Got the release date written down here at 1982. I think that was a sci-fi movie. Great movies of the 80s. We'll create that, and that shows up now in our data grid. We can view its details. We can edit it. Like if I remove the title and just try to save that, it says, nope, that's not valid. So validation is working. Add it back, and we're good to go. And we can delete that movie as well. Okay, so basic CRUD functionality without having to write any code. We can then also tweak and improve this UI experience. Like you might notice that this release date column, the column header looks a little weird. Like it's just taking the property name, doesn't have a space in it. No problem, we can fix that. Let's go back to index.razor where we had our quick grid control. And I'm going to set the title on the release date column. Let's set it to release date. And we should be able to just hot reload that into the app. And there it goes. Now it looks nice. And then, the format of the date doesn't look too great. Let's tweak that. Do format. And we'll do month, day, year, like we do in the United States. Like savages. I don't know why we put the month first, but we do. So let's save that. And now it looks much nicer. The release date column is updated. We can also make like the grid interactive. Like we can make one of the columns sortable. To make the grid interactive, we need to make this page interactive. So I'm going to add an interactive render mode like we saw earlier on the counter. I'm going to use interactive server. And then on the title column, let's add the sortable true property so that we can sort by column, but just by clicking the column header. Let's go ahead and rerun that to apply the interactive render mode. All right, there we go. And now you can see I can click on the title and now it's sorting the title column, easy peasy. We can even add a paginator. If we have like lots of data, we have a built-in paginator control. So let's add a paginator down here at the bottom. You can see that Visual Studio is telling us that we need to add a pagination state object. That's so the paginator can coordinate with the quick grid. So let's add a code block, a C# code block down here at the bottom, and we'll add a pagination state field. We'll new that up. And we'll say items per page. I don't know, let's do five items per page. And then we just need to specify that state object on the paginator and then also on the quick grid. So I think it's like pagination is the property. There it is. All right, so we go ahead and save that. And let's go ahead and rerun it. And go back to the app. Okay, and now we've got a paginator, so we can page through all of our data. This quick grid supports virtualization as well. You can control the styling, fully customizable. So just in a few minutes with Blazor, you can quickly build a Blazor web application. You can use interactive features or advanced server-side rendering features. You can connect to your data, do forms and validation with very little work and stay productive fast, all with the power of .NET. Yeah. So I think next what we're going to see is how you can use Sonar Source's set of technologies to make your Blazor web apps even better. Denny.
Thanks a lot, Daniel. So that's what I'm going to present next. For those of you who don't know what Sonar does, we help developers and development teams write clean code, and we offer a solution that does automatic code review. And you'll see what that means in the demo that I'm going to present. And I will show you what we have. So I will show you what we have prepared and what is already released, the support for Blazor in SonarQube, and also a sneak peek of what we're preparing, what we're working on for SonarLint in the IDE. So this is a Blazor app. It is from the .NET Blazor samples GitHub repo. You can play with it if you want. So it has what more as the CRUD functionalities that Daniel already presented live. It has a list of contacts that it's queried from a local SQLite database. You can view them, you can add a contact, you can edit a contact or delete it, and everything that works. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna modify this this app, and I'm gonna introduce some bugs and see what Sonar can help how Sonar can help developers not introduce bugs. So I go to my Visual Studio instance. It was running in the background. I stopped it. I will go. So what, before I go to this test.razor file, I'm gonna go to the view contact razor. So what this currently, what the layout is, it has some pages with add contact, edit contact, home, and view contact. And those pages are using components in the background. So view contact, for example, is using this actually isn't using a component because it's a very simple page. And what I want to do is to change this contact ID from int to long, because say it's a super successful app, and I need to store the ID on 64 bits instead of 32 bits. So I am running the app again. You see it is loading locally, and I'm now gonna, actually I get an exception, you see, and the exception says, okay, unable to cast 64 to 32 bits. And if I go back to my IDE, I actually see that actually Sonar was telling me about it. So if I go here, I see that actually there is this error from Sonar that parameter type int does not match route parameter. So what we do, and the rules that we've added for Blazor are complementary to what Visual Studio already presents for you. So in a nutshell, this is what you will be able to get with SonarLint in the IDE, and then SonarQube is our on-premise server that help development teams manage quality, and it's the same here. You can see where is the issue. It doesn't match the parameter. We educate developers. We say, what is the problem? How can you fix it? And then more information sending to the Microsoft website. Now, if I'm gonna get this back to int, and let's say I wanna make this view contact page only show some of the data. Say I have a valid reason to pass a query parameter and say, hey, contact filter columns equals name. So I only show the name, right? And if I do that, and well, you already see here query parameter type contact filter forms is not supported. So Sonar is already telling me, hey, this is not something that you should do. And what will happen if you do this is, well, you will get a similar crash. Basically, I click on it and then I get an invalid operation exception, query string values cannot be parsed. So you can, and these sort of issues, because the build application builds, so there isn't any build error, and if developers don't properly test their solutions, they can easily, well, more or less easily, depends, but sometimes, you know, you can have null reference exceptions, so you can have such bugs as well if you don't test your code properly and for large applications. So this is some things that Sonar can help. Some other bits that I'm not gonna live demo. What happens is a rule that tells you, hey, if you want, like Daniel said, you can call C# code from JavaScript, but in order to do that, you need to annotate a method with JS invocable. And we've added a rule telling you that, hey, methods marked as JS invocable should be public, because if you don't make them public, it won't work. Basically, the JavaScript won't be able to call this C# code. And this is a rule that is actually relevant for .NET 6 and .NET 7. Component parameters can only receive query parameter values in routable components. What this means is, okay, view contact, you see it has here a route, and basically you can add such a supply parameter query from query into a routable component, but this component, test.razor, does not have a route. So in .NET 6 and .NET 7, these value wouldn't be passed from where this component was used. Now they fixed it. They actually made it a cascading a parameter, which means that in .NET 8, it is a valid scenario. And the last thing before I hand over to my colleague Dennis to talk about SonarQube is just to talk about SonarCloud, is showing you the experience inside SonarQube. So this is SonarQube 10.4, which got released last week. And as I already showed you this issue, you can also you get also normal C# rules that we raise here. Okay, it's a rule raising that, hey, you have a to-do, you should do something about it and not ship it like this. And then all of these issues have comprehensive explanations, so developers get educated and get sent to the official documentation from Microsoft about each of these issues. Now, I also want to tell you, because I mentioned that for SonarLint we are still working on it, and before doing that, maybe Camille, can you open the poll for the people joining this? Okay, so you have a poll here where you can share what framework, what .NET what web framework you use for web development in .NET in your current project. So either of these. So I'm gonna wait for those. I'm gonna present those results later on, and then I just wanna share with you our current state of what we support for Blazor. So first of all, all our existing C# rules that are on SonarCloud and on SonarQube, they raise issues on Razor templates, so .razor files, .cs HTML files, be them in Blazor applications or in other Razor pages or ASP.NET Core MVC, so only in .NET, not in .NET Framework currently, but we raise issues on both. So SonarCloud and SonarQube 10.3 support this, and the 5 rules that we've added, I showed 4 of them, and Denis is my colleague. He's going to show the 5th one. They got shipped in SonarQube 10.4, and they are part of the community edition, so you can use them in case you are using the community edition. And that's what I wanted to share.
Love that. I love that how the Sonar uses these analyzers, design time analyzers, to help you catch those issues, before you go into production, before you're running. So you have that that real-time feedback from the tooling while you're in development. That's great.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. And okay, I stopped sharing, but I want to share one last thing about SonarLint. So I forgot to say about this. This is currently work in progress. So we are working on it, and to bring the functionality that I demoed, I had the development version on my machine that I demoed in the IDE with the rules. And to give a quick explanation why we haven't shipped it yet in SonarLint is because the source generators for the Razor templates. So there are, during the build, some source generators generate C# code for these Razor templates, and they work differently at compile time versus design time during the IDE. So they have slightly different implementations, and we need to support basically a different behavior. And we will be able to support a Blazor and Razor analysis in SonarLint only on Visual Studio 17.9 and newer. So Daniel's team helped us with implementing some changes that will get shipped today, right? Visual Studio 17.9 will be shipped today, if I'm not wrong.
17.9 is coming out today. It's just I think in a couple hours here, maybe. But hopefully by the time, if you're watching the recording, I'm guessing by that time it already will have shipped for people that are live. Yeah, we're just moments away from Visual Studio 17.9 being released as stable.
Yeah, you guys are awesome. I'm really impressed. Andre, Daniel, you are doing live demos, and Andre doing it on a development version. You're a brave soul, man.
Yeah, it worked.
It worked.
It worked.
Demo gods were good today. All right, over to Dennis.
All right. So Andre showed you what happens in the IDE and on SonarQube, which is the on-premises version of the server we're offering. I will show you what the Blazor analysis can look like on SonarCloud, which is the software as a service offering. Sorry. This is actually a little example of what you can see if you analyze a project. This project, it's actually the MudBlazor library. It's a very popular Blazor component library, an open source one. So I just quickly forked the repository and I ran an analysis on it. And this is a little sample of what you can find. You will see, for example, low impact issues like encapsulation problems or commented out code that's never been removed. So as you see here, that's a very standard problem that you can hit. What's more interesting is, for example, the fixed rule that we added for Blazor that Andre was talking about. You can see it here. For this one, it's about how you declare event handlers. In that case, we're using a Lambda. And that's a very, very common way to handle events in JavaScript, for example. The problem is in Blazor, if you do that in a component that renders hundreds or thousands of items, that can lead to performance problems. So we warn you that you should not do that unless you've really carefully made sure that this is not going to cause performance problems. We also tell you why this is an issue. And we also give you some guidance, because there's a lot of guidance on performance best practices coming from Microsoft. So you can follow the link to learn about it. And we also have benchmarks to tell you exactly what the usage pattern looks like. Another one that could be very interesting. This one is a reliability issue. So that's basically a runtime bug waiting to happen. So if you go there, you will see that the analysis looked at this piece of code, and the context variable here in that if is tested for being null. But in the case if it is null, we'll end up in the else case, and in this expression we dereference it. So we could conceivably hit a null reference exception, which is not something you want to do at runtime. So thankfully, you will be warned if you run an analysis from SonarCloud or SonarQube. And the last example that I have is this one. So this one is all about maintainability. This type of error, cognitive complexity, tells you that your method is, well, hard to read. I'll give you a minute to take that in. All right, even if you wrote it, Daniel, if you come back in a month, what do you think?
It's
do you think
a
you'll be
little
able to?
long.
Yes, it is.
A little verbose, yeah.
So you might be familiar with cyclomatic complexity. We came up with a little bit of a different metric to really help find problems in complex methods. Basically, this one also counts ifs. So it counts all the branches in your code. And usually, well, the way to sort a problem like that is to break your method into smaller methods to be called, because a name is much more descriptive than a bunch of code like that. Here we're in a Blazor context, so probably the best thing to do would be actually to extract it into components, which is what Blazor is made for. Right. So this is just, as I said, this is just a few examples of the things you could find in your Blazor markup. And this is actually an overall view of the code of this library. Okay, it tells you exactly how many issues of each type we found in the code. Now, granted, that can be a bit frightening. 3.1 thousand maintainability issues, but for 78,000 lines of code, it's not bad. I can tell you from experience, I ran this over one of my applications, which had a 20-year-old code base. That was much more frightening than what this is. And in fact, we actually are in contact with the Blazor maintainers to offer them access to SonarCloud, show them how to use it, because it's actually completely free for open source projects. So they just have to have to sign in and help them reduce that technical debt, basically. But yeah, if you run this on your code base, as I said, it could be a bit frightening. Because if you have thousands of issues, you might be wondering, okay, what am I going to do with that? And the problem is you cannot just stop development and spend months correcting the issues. You have to have some kind of method to deal with that amount of debt. And that's exactly what our products try to offer you. It's a way to deal with that debt over time. And this is called Clean as you code. So Clean as you code, it's, as I said, it's a method that allows you to gradually reduce your technical debt over time. And how does that work? Well, in a nutshell, the only thing you have to do is to ensure that each new piece of code that you introduce is clean. And when I say new piece of code, I mean the code that you add because you're creating a new functionality. So it's a new method, new class file, what have you. Or it's code that you modify because you came back to a specific method and you're trying to deal with a customer issue. So you're modifying the existing code. And why is that important? It's because when you are modifying existing code or creating a new piece of code, it's in your head. Basically, you own that piece of code. So it's pretty easy if you've been warned that there's an issue and we explain what the issue is, it's very easy to correct it. There's no context switch. Okay, that's what kills productivity, when you have to come back and deal with existing problems. So it's important to deal with code as it is produced. So why does it work? Well, let's imagine this is your code base before you start using Clean as you go. This one is much, much, much worse than Blazor was, as you can see. If you imagine each square is a piece of code, so we could say a line of code, we could say a file, it doesn't really matter. When you start applying Clean as you code, what's going to happen is after a year, this is what your code base will look like. On the right, you have your new pieces of code, and you made sure they were clean. They're brand new, they're perfect. And on the left, this is where you had to touch the code to correct issues or to introduce a new method, for example, because you had a new functionality to support. So you can already see that the code base is better than it was 1 year ago. And if you continue applying that concept after 2 years, this is what it will look like. And after 3 years, well, it's even better. Granted, there are still problems here, but at the same time, this code has been running in production for 3 years already. So normally, these are not major problems, and they will be dealt with over time when you get to it. Now, you might be wondering why do we say that works? Well, if you search on the internet for something called the Git of Theseus, someone ran a study on big open source projects on Git, and they showed that in those big open source projects, on average, any given line of code has a 50% chance of not being there anymore after 3.3 years on average. So from that fact, you can assume that if you apply this method in 5 years, 50% of your code will be clean. And we actually apply that every day at Sonar, and we can tell you it works. So how do you actually do that? Because it's just not enough to have a method. You need to have the tools that help you pinpoint the problems and make sure you deal with them in good time. So it's actually pretty simple. The first thing you have to do is to decide what new code means, okay? So it can be two things. You have new code in the PR that you're actually working on, okay? But that's not enough. Maybe you have quick fixes that actually can be committed directly to master. It's not the best policy, but it can happen, or for different reasons. So you have to define also what new code means in the context of your whole application. And we offer two options. One is, okay, new code is everything that has been written since we published the last version. That's if you ship once a year, for example, or every 3 months. Or otherwise, if you do continuous delivery, we suggest you use a number of days. For example, everything in the last 30 days is considered new and should be dealt with before you actually ship. The second thing you have to do is to define your standards. What do I mean by that? Well, it's the rules basically that you are going to apply as a team. You decide which of the rules that we provide you're gonna abide by. By default, we have what's called a quality profile, that contains 313 rules that are active, but we actually have many more than that, upwards of 500, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Andre.
We have like 450 rules.
400, sorry.
Yeah. So you can see here on Dennis's screen that there are basically 313 active rules and 145 inactive rules. So basically that adds up to roughly, yeah.
Yeah.
450.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
So you decide which one actually make sense in your context. And then you enforce your standards on new code by making sure that PRs cannot be merged and software cannot be released if there are issues. So how do you do that? Well, you define what we call a quality gate. A quality gate is a way to prevent merging. For example, if you're using GitHub workflow will analyze your code and will fail the build if you don't match the quality gate that you've set. We normally recommend that you go for no issues at all, and this actually works because that's what we do at Sonar. But you're welcome to let go a little bit on the maintainability, for example, if you accept a little bit of technical debt over time. There's also, of course, quality gate verifies that your coverage is sufficient. And of course, this only works if you analyze regularly. So after each pull request push and after each merge or push on main. And the way you do that, well, that's what I explained. You go to your GitHub repository, for example, and you create a workflow that will invoke the Sonar analysis on your code base, either on push on main or on pull requests. And hopefully, to do that, before you even get to PR or to the main branch, you have a third layer of defense. It's actually your first one, and Andre touched on that, is the IDE extension. It's called SonarLint. We provide it for Visual Studio Code, or JetBrains IDEs. So you're covered whichever your IDE of choice is for .NET. And this will allow you to catch most of the issues live in the IDE thanks to Microsoft's Roslyn technology, which is actually really, really cool. And well, that's it in a nutshell. That's how you can reduce your debts on your Blazor apps or your everyday apps, thanks to SonarCloud. And with that, I will give the mic back to Manish.
All right. Thank you, Daniel, Andre, and Dennis for an insightful session. I was particularly impressed with all three of you doing a live demo. Pretty cool. Awesome. As we move into the next part of this webinar, which is Q&A, it's time for Q&A. As I gather the questions for you, I briefly wanted to share information about our upcoming webinar that Sonar will be hosting with you all on February 22nd. The information is up there on the slide. There's a link also that we'll share in the chat. We would love to have you join the next webinar. And you'll also see a brief poll to let us know if you'd like to be contacted. And so please do participate if you can, if you'd like to know more about our solutions. As a reminder, after the Q&A, a short survey will appear, and we greatly appreciate your feedback. And with that, I will start looking at some of the questions that have come up and ask our speakers here to help me answer those questions.
And one thing I can quickly share the results of the survey while you're looking for the questions. So regarding that, we have 57 participants answered to the question around what framework they use for web development in .NET, and 51% are using Blazor. 5% ASP.NET Core Razor Pages, 18% ASP.NET Core MVC, 4% ASP.NET Framework, MVC, 11% something else, and 12% don't do web development. So thanks everyone for answering the initial poll.
All right. Thank you, Andre. Let's take a few questions. There are quite a few of them. I'm not sure if we'll be able to get to all of them, but let me start with the Blazor questions first, if that's okay. So I think these are probably for Daniel, but feel free to jump in, Andre or Dennis, if you'd like to add something. How does Blazor compare to other popular JavaScript frameworks?
That's a great question. So, well, I mean, the first obvious difference is that with Blazor, you're writing C# instead of writing JavaScript typically, which is what you use for most popular JavaScript frameworks like React or Angular or Vue. So you get to have the productivity of a modern C# language, strong typing, and then access to the entire .NET platform through C#. Blazor is similar. If you were to kind of squint at Blazor, it probably looks the most similar to React in terms of how its component model works and functions. So if you're familiar with React and you do some Blazor development, you might feel a little bit like, oh, this kind of feels like React, but done with .NET and C# with some of the .NET niceties. Blazor also is the server piece for Blazor will be based off of ASP.NET Core, so you're getting the full power and performance of the .NET runtime on the server. Like I think there's very few developer frameworks on the planet that can beat ASP.NET Core when it comes to performance on the server in terms of throughputs and server use resource utilization. So all the static server-side rendering support that we added in Blazor, even the interactive server rendering is leveraging that ASP.NET Core backend. But from other perspectives, things are very similar. It's a component model. It's a diff-based rendering engine. Like Blazor keeps track of what's in the DOM and what you're trying to render and only applies the changes to the browser DOM that you've rendered in your components. In some ways, it's very similar. The big differences are that it's .NET, C# powered by ASP.NET Core on the back end.
All right, thank you, Daniel. Next question is, how does it look with Blazor's WebAssembly, Blazor WebAssembly, WASM?
Yeah, I saw that question as well. I didn't demo that just because of constraints of time. But when you're building a Blazor web app, like you have this choice, like you can make your components interactive from either the server or from the client. And everything I showed, that was all done from the server because in many ways it's simpler. Like your code's already running on the server, all your code runs on the server. And so if you need to talk to the database or server-side resources, well, you're already there and you can still do those interactive experiences like you normally think of doing with a client-side JavaScript code. You can handle all of that from the server by having that real-time connection with the browser. But you can also move code down to the browser too and run it client-side on the user's machine using WebAssembly. When you create your Blazor web app, there's an option that asks you at the beginning, like, well, what interactivity modes do you want to enable? And by default, it will just enable the server one. If you want WebAssembly too, you just flip the option to do WebAssembly, and that will set you up with not just one project for the server, but also a client project for the client, because there'll be code that's being built not just for the server, but code that needs to now be transferred across the network to the client. So then that's where you would stick all your code that you want to run client-side on the user's machine. But you write your components the same. They're still .razor files, on-click handlers, component syntax for defining the UI. It's just running on the other side of the wire on the user's device. And you can pick how much code you want to run on WebAssembly and how much you want to run on the server. You could say, just a few pages I want to push down to the client. Or you might decide, the whole app should run client-side on WebAssembly. I don't want any of it running from the server. That's possible too. There is also an additional template, which is the Blazor WebAssembly standalone app template. It's different from the Blazor web app template. And it's different because it's designed to run purely client-side, like without any server piece at all. The Blazor web app template is optimized for leveraging the server to make experiences better, doing pre-rendering, adding server-side rendering where you want it. The Blazor WebAssembly standalone template will only run on the client, and it's for hosts that are like like static site hosts, like GitHub Pages, or Azure has one of these, like Azure Static Web Apps, where you just want to publish a bunch of static files and there's no server piece. So you can use the Blazor WebAssembly standalone app template for that particular case.
All right, thank you, Daniel. I have a couple of questions on the Sonar side as well. Let me go over them, and I think I know the answer to a couple of them, but Andre, feel free to add to my answers or inputs. How does SonarQube Developer Edition automatically recognize, or no, not how does SonarQube Developer Edition automatically recognize Blazor applications too? Or do we have to enable something specifically? And what version of the Developer Edition do we need for this? Yes, so yeah, you can automatically scan Blazor projects. You don't need any special configuration. The support starts with SonarQube 10.4 onwards. It's available in Community Edition and higher. And yeah, anything else to add there, Andre?
You
It's
said
also
it
available
all,
in,
so
it's also in SonarCloud, yeah.
and it's and analysis. So Blazor analysis is available also in SonarCube community, which is free and open source, and anybody can use it, can download it. So sorry, I was answering a question in the Q&A, and you can, so it is enabled by default, and in case you don't want it, you can disable it from the settings of the project, but it is enabled by default.
Cool. There was a question about pricing. I think this keeps coming up again and again, so I'll just answer that. How about the prices of this great tool? Will there be a free version? So we have three products actually. SonarLint ID is always free. It's a free ID extension, works with most of the IDs. SonarQube comes in both community edition and commercial editions. So community edition is open source based and is always free and does include Blazor support and 19 other languages, if I'm not mistaken. If you want more than 19 languages, we go up to about 30 plus languages with SonarQube Enterprise Edition. And there's also the Developer Edition available and the Data Center Edition available. Those the commercial editions, of course, come with a price based on lines of code. And then, of course, SonarCloud is a cloud version, cloud-based offering. We have free analysis for all open source projects, public projects. For paid projects, for private projects, there's a fee. It's again based on lines of code. So we have those three products. In the ID is SonarLint, on-premises or self-managed is SonarQube, and SonarCloud is a SaaS-based offering. I hope that answers that question. There's one last question which I'll take, and probably we can wrap it up after that. Is taint analysis available for Blazor? I think that's a question for Andre or Dennis.
So currently it's not yet. It is on the roadmap, if I'm not wrong, Dennis.
Yes, I believe it is.
Yeah. So hopefully this year we're gonna have it for Blazor as well.
Nice. Excellent.
Excellent. Excellent. I think we have covered most of the questions. If we have left any, we will answer them and share those results on our community forum. And let me wrap this up. We are almost at the top of the hour. So thank you again, Daniel, Andrea, and Dennis. And thanks to all of you who joined our webinar today and asked us questions. Sorry if we missed one of your questions, but we will get to it. We will answer those questions, and our community is a great place to pose any additional questions that you may have. You will also be able to find the replay and the Q&A of today's session being posted there. And do check out sonarsource.com for additional information about how you can use Clean as you code and about our products. And thank you again in advance for providing your feedback for the survey today. That will shortly pop up on your screen. And we look forward to seeing you all in the next webinar. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you. Have a good evening or day, depending on where you are.